The fluorescent lights of Seattle General's oncology wing hummed with the same tired frequency as my own heartbeat. I'd memorized every flicker, every buzz, every crack in the sterile white ceiling tiles during these weekly treatments. My arm ached where the IV needle pierced my skin, pumping chemicals that were supposed to save my life while making me feel like I was dying by inches. "Zara, you're doing great," Dr. Chen said, her voice the practiced calm of someone who'd delivered both miracles and death sentences. "Your levels are improving. The new protocol is working." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Working meant I wasn't getting worse. It didn't mean I was getting better. It didn't mean the medical bills had stopped piling up like gravestones marking my family's financial ruin. It didn't mean my sister Isabella's worried calls would stop, or that her husband Marco's connections in the Lanzimani family would stop being our only lifeline. The treatment center's waiting room had become my second home over the past 8 months. I knew every magazine, every worn chair, every exhausted face that cycled through seeking hope in sterile halls. Today was different, though. Today, Isabella sat across from me, her designer handbag clutched too tightly in her lap, her perfectly manicured nails tapping an anxious rhythm against the leather. "We need to talk," she'd said when she arrived, her usual warm smile replaced by something that looked like determination, wrestling with guilt. I pulled the thin hospital blanket higher, suddenly cold despite the overheated room. "About what?" "About a solution." Isabella leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper, even though the nearest patient was 3 chairs away, absorbed in her own private battle with mortality. "Marco has been talking to people, important people, about your situation." My stomach clenched. In Isabella's world, in Marco's world, important people meant the kind who operated in shadows, who built empires on fear and loyalty, who solved problems with methods that never made it into police reports. "Bella, we talked about this. I don't want—" "It's not what you think." She cut me off, her hand reaching for mine. Her skin was warm, healthy, alive in a way mine hadn't felt in months. It's an arrangement, a marriage." The word hung between us like something toxic. "Marriage?" I repeated, my voice flat. "To Atlas Zimmerman." The name sent a chill through the overheated room. Everyone in Seattle knew that name, even if they'd never seen the man behind it. Tech mogul, philanthropist. And if the whispered rumors were true, the head of the most powerful organized crime family in the Pacific Northwest. The Atlas Zimmerman, who just donated $20 million to this hospital? I asked, my laugh brittle and sharp. The one who owns half the city? He needs a wife. For political reasons. Family reasons. Isabella's words came faster now, tumbling over each other in her rush to explain. There are people questioning his leadership, his legitimacy. A marriage to someone connected to the Lanzimani family would cement his position, silence the doubters. So I'm a political prop. The IV machine beeped, reminding me that my body was still fighting its war, even as my world was being rearranged like chess pieces on a board. Your family, Isabella's voice cracked. Zara, the medical bills are destroying you. Mom and Dad refinanced the house twice. I've tried to help, but Marco's position, it's complicated. This would solve everything. Atlas would cover all your medical expenses. The best doctors, the best treatments, everything. I stared at the clear liquid dripping into my veins, counting the drops like seconds ticking away from a life I'd thought I understood. What does he get out of it besides political legitimacy? Respect, unquestioned authority, an alliance that makes him untouchable within the organization. She paused. And he gets you. The way she said it made me look up. What does that mean? It means he's not a monster, Zara. He's complicated, controlled. He won't hurt you. Marco vouches for that absolutely. But he also won't love you. Isabella's eyes held mine. This would be a contract. Protection and resources in exchange for your name and presence at his side. Nothing more. Nothing more. The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they felt like a prison sentence dressed up as salvation. I need to think about it. You have 3 days. Isabella stood, smoothing her dress with hands that trembled slightly. He wants to meet you. Tuesday. His office downtown. After that, the decision is yours. After she left, I sat in that uncomfortable chair watching chemicals drip into my bloodstream and wondered when my life had become something negotiated by powerful men in expensive suits. The treatment ended. Dr. Chen removed the IV with practiced efficiency, pressed cotton to the puncture wound, told me to take it easy and drink plenty of water, as if my biggest problem was staying hydrated. I took the bus home because I'd sold my car 6 months ago to pay for medications. The Seattle rain painted the windows in streaks that blurred the city into abstract art. Somewhere out there, Atlas Zimmerman sat in his tower of glass and steel, pulling strings that made people dance, deciding that a dying woman made acceptable collateral in his power games. My apartment was small, a studio in a building that had seen better decades. The roof leaked when it rained hard. The heating was unreliable. The neighbors fought loudly and often, but it was mine. Bought with money I'd earned before my body had declared war on itself, before medical debt had consumed everything. I made tea because that's what you do when your life falls apart, and you need your hands to do something, anything, to feel purposeful. The chamomile smell filled the small space, familiar and comforting. I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug and let myself imagine it. Being Mrs. Atlas Zimmerman, living in whatever palace a man like that called home, having access to medical care that didn't require choosing between treatment and rent. Never being loved. The thought shouldn't have bothered me. I'd stopped believing in fairy tales long before the diagnosis. Romance was for healthy people with futures. I'd been focused on surviving one day at a time, one treatment at a time, one bill at a time. Love was a luxury I couldn't afford. But somehow, the idea of entering a marriage with love explicitly off the table felt more terminal than my diagnosis. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Simple. Direct. Tuesday, 2 p.m. Zimmerman Tower, 47th floor. Come alone. AZ. I stared at the message for a long time. He already had my number, already knew I'd been told, already assumed I'd come. The arrogance of it should have made me angry. Instead, I felt something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or the kind of fatalistic acceptance that comes from having so few choices that even bad ones start looking like opportunities. I typed back, "I'll be there." His response came immediately. Good. Tuesday arrived with the same relentless gray rain that defined Seattle in autumn. I dressed carefully, choosing the one good dress I still owned that fit my thinner frame. Black, simple, professional. I did my makeup to hide the circles under my eyes, the pallor that chemotherapy had painted on my skin. I wanted to look alive, capable, like something more than a charity case being bartered between powerful men. Zimmerman Tower dominated the Seattle skyline, all glass and steel and architectural ambition. The lobby was marble and minimalist design, populated by people who moved with the certainty that came from knowing exactly where they belonged in the world's hierarchy. I felt like an intruder, an imposter in my second-hand dress and practical shoes. The security guard directed me to a private elevator with a knowing look that made my skin crawl. How many women had he sent up to the 47th floor? How many had come back down? The elevator rose smoothly, silently, the numbers climbing like my heart rate. At 47, the doors opened onto a reception area that probably cost more than my entire building. A woman with platinum hair and a smile like a weapon looked up from her desk. "Ms. Lanzimani, Mr. Zimmerman is expecting you." She led me down a hallway lined with art that belonged in museums, past offices where serious people did serious work, to a set of double doors at the end. She knocked once, opened without waiting for a response, and gestured me inside. The office was enormous, one wall entirely glass overlooking the Seattle Sound. The rain created a shifting gray curtain beyond the windows. The space itself was all dark wood and leather, expensive and masculine and designed to intimidate. And behind the desk, watching me with eyes that missed nothing, sat Atlas Zimmerman. He was younger than I expected. Early 30s, maybe, with dark hair cut short and sharp features that looked like they'd been designed for magazine covers or marble statues. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my medical bills, his white shirt open at the collar in a calculated display of controlled casualness. But it was his eyes that caught me. Gray, like the Seattle sky, but with something colder beneath. Something that suggested the rumors about him might actually underestimate the danger. He stood as I entered, a gesture toward manners that felt more calculated than courteous. Ms. Lanzimani. Mr. Zimmerman. Sit. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, and I noticed he didn't frame it as a request. I sat, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. He remained standing, moving to the windows, positioning himself so the gray light painted him in silhouette. Another power play, making me look into the light while he remained shadowed. Your sister explained the arrangement? She explained a proposal. A proposal implies negotiation. He turned, the light catching the sharp angles of his face. This isn't a negotiation, Ms. Lanzimani. This is an offer. You accept it entirely or not at all. Then why am I here? Why not just have Marco relay your terms? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. Because I wanted to see you. To assess whether you'd be suitable. Suitable. I couldn't keep the bitterness from the word. Like furniture, or a business acquisition. Exactly like a business acquisition. He moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk, close enough now that I could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and leather. I need a wife who understands that this marriage serves a specific purpose, someone who won't develop inconvenient expectations about romance or affection, someone who needs what I can provide enough to accept the limitations of what I'm offering. And what are you offering? Complete medical care, the best oncologist in the country, experimental treatments, whatever it takes. His voice was matter-of-fact, discussing my life like a line item on a budget. In exchange, you'll live in my home, attend events at my side, present yourself as my wife in every public setting. You'll have access to resources most people only dream of. But not your heart. I don't have one to give. The words were delivered without emotion, a simple statement of fact. What I'm offering is protection, security, and the means to survive your illness. Nothing more. Nothing less. I should have been offended. Should have stood up and walked out. But I'd learned something about desperation in the past 8 months. It made you consider offers you'd have laughed at before. It made impossible choices look like the only options. Why me specifically? I asked. There must be dozens of women connected to the families who'd jump at this. Because you're dying. His bluntness hit like a physical blow. Because you need this marriage more than you need love. Because your desperation makes you controllable in a way that ambition never could. And because your connection to the Lanzimani family serves my purposes without entangling me in their internal politics. The cruelty of his honesty was almost refreshing. No pretty lies, no false comfort, just brutal calculation. I have conditions, I heard myself say. His eyebrow raised slightly. You're in no position to make conditions. Then you're in no position to get what you need. I met his gaze, finding some reserve of strength I'd thought chemotherapy had burned away. You need this marriage to solidify your position. That gives me leverage, however small. He was silent for a long moment, studying me with those cold gray eyes. Then he smiled, and it was worse than his frown. State your conditions. I want my own space, a room, an area, somewhere that's mine, where you don't enter without permission. Granted. I want to continue seeing my own doctors alongside whoever you provide. I don't want my medical care completely controlled by you. Acceptable. And I want the ability to leave. If this becomes... I struggled for the right word. Unbearable. I want a way out that doesn't leave my family vulnerable or my medical care revoked. His expression hardened. No. Then we don't have a deal. He moved with startling speed, his hands coming to rest on the arms of my chair, caging me in. His face was inches from mine, and I could see flecks of darker gray in his eyes, could feel the controlled danger radiating from him like heat. Understand something, Zara. The use of my first name felt invasive, too intimate. When you become my wife, you become mine. Not in a romantic sense, but in every practical way that matters. Your safety becomes my responsibility. Your medical care becomes my concern. And your loyalty becomes non-negotiable. I don't build escape clauses into my contracts. I'm not a contract. I'm a person. You're both. He straightened, moving back to his position behind the desk. You have until Friday to decide. After that, the offer expires. I stood on shaking legs. And if I say no, then you go back to your life. Your medical debt, your failing treatments, your slow descent into whatever end awaits you. His voice held no threat, just inevitability. I'm offering you time, Zara. Maybe years, certainly more than you'll get without me. The only question is whether your pride is worth more than your life. I walked to the door, my hand on the handle before I turned back. You said you don't have a heart to give. What happened to it? For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or the ghost of it. It was destroyed, along with the last person foolish enough to matter to me. His expression went blank again, wiped clean of any emotion. That's why I can promise you safety, Zara. Because I learned long ago that caring for someone is the most dangerous thing a man in my position can do. And I won't make that mistake again. The rain had intensified by the time I left Zimmerman Tower, turning Seattle's streets into rivers. I stood under the building's awning, watching water cascade from the sky, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. A man had offered me life in exchange for a loveless marriage. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Chen. Latest results show progression. We need to discuss more aggressive options. Progression. Medical speak for the cancer was winning. I looked up at the tower, at the glass and steel monument to Atlas Zimmerman's power, and wondered if selling myself to survive was courage or cowardice. Friday came too quickly. I stood in my apartment Friday morning, surrounded by the remnants of the life I was about to leave behind, the few possessions worth keeping fit into 2 suitcases. Everything else, the secondhand furniture, the thrift store dishes, the accumulation of a life lived on the margins, would stay behind like shed skin. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Isabella, 2 from Marco, and 1 text from Atlas Zimmerman, sent at exactly 8:09 a.m. Car arrives at 10. Bring what matters. Everything else will be provided. The presumption that I'd accepted still made my jaw clench. But he'd been right about one thing. Pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. Dr. Chen had confirmed what we both already knew. Without more aggressive treatment, I had months, not years. The experimental protocol she'd mentioned cost more than my family could earn in a decade. I'd called Isabella Wednesday night and said one word. Yes. Her relief had been palpable through the phone, followed immediately by a flood of instructions. The wedding would be small, immediate, handled by Marco's connections. Atlas had already begun paperwork. Everything was arranged, decided, locked into place before I'd even officially agreed. at 9:57. I carried my suitcases down 3 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken for 2 weeks. The black SUV was already waiting, idling at the curb like a patient predator. The driver who emerged was massive, dressed in a suit that couldn't quite hide the weapon I was certain he carried. He had the kind of face that had seen violence and learned to enjoy it. "Ms. Lanzimani." His voice was surprisingly gentle. "I'm Marcus. I'll be driving you today." He took my suitcases with ease, loading them into the immaculate vehicle, while I took one last look at the building that had been my refuge. A neighbor I barely knew watched from a window. Mrs. Chen from 2B stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I wondered what they'd think when I didn't come back, if they'd notice at all. The drive took us away from my neighborhood of struggling artists and forgotten people, through the financial district where glass towers competed for space in the clouds, and finally into an area of Seattle I'd only ever seen in magazines. The houses here weren't houses. They were estates, each one set back from the street behind gates and walls and the kind of security that money could buy. Marcus turned down a private road, stopped at a gate that opened automatically, and continued up a drive lined with old growth trees that created a canopy overhead. The house, mansion, really, emerged from the greenery like something from a different era. Modern architecture blended with classical elements, all stone and glass and careful design. "Welcome home, Ms. Lanzimani," Marcus said, and I heard the irony in my brain. This would never be home. This was a cage, however beautiful. The front door opened before we reached it. A woman in her 50s stood waiting, her silver hair pulled back severely, her expression professional and cold. "Ms. Lanzimani, I'm Mrs. Kovac, the house manager. Mr. Zimmerman asked me to show you to your quarters. Quarters, not my room, not my space. Quarters, like I was personnel. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, art that belonged in museums, furniture that looked untouchable. Everything was gray and white and black, sophisticated and soulless. Nothing personal, nothing warm, nothing that suggested an actual human lived here. Mrs. Kovac led me up a sweeping staircase, down a hallway, lined with closed doors. Mr. Zimmerman's suite is in the east wing, she explained without looking back. Your quarters are here, in the west, opposite ends of the house. The symbolism wasn't subtle. She opened double doors onto a space that was larger than my entire apartment had been. A bedroom with a king bed dressed in expensive linens. A sitting area with a fireplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens. A bathroom that gleamed with marble and gold fixtures. Your things will be unpacked for you, Mrs. Kovac continued. Mr. Zimmerman has arranged for a wardrobe befitting your new position. The stylist will arrive tomorrow morning. Dr. Morrison will be here Tuesday for your first consultation. And Mr. Zimmerman expects you for dinner tonight at 7. Formal dress. She turned to leave, paused at the door. A word of advice, Ms. Lanzimani. Mr. Zimmerman values punctuality, discretion, and obedience. Remember that, and this arrangement will be much easier for everyone. After she left, I sank onto the bed, my hands shaking. This was real. I was here, in Atlas Zimmerman's house, about to become Atlas Zimmerman's wife, entering a world I didn't understand with rules I hadn't been told. The closet revealed what Mrs. Kovac had meant. My 2 suitcases worth of belongings looked pathetic, next to racks of designer dresses, shelves of shoes, drawers of lingerie that still had tags attached. Everything in my size. Everything expensive. Everything chosen without my input. I found a dress for dinner, black, conservative, elegant, and hung it on the door. Then I explored my quarters like a prisoner learning her cell. The bathroom had a tub deep enough to drown in. The sitting room had books I'd never read on shelves that looked decorative rather than functional. The windows didn't open. That detail stuck with me. Beautiful views, but I couldn't access the air outside. Couldn't hear the city, couldn't feel the rain. At 6:45, I dressed carefully, my hands steadier than they'd been that morning. If this was my new reality, I'd face it without cowering. I'd agreed to this arrangement. I'd walked into this cage with open eyes. Marcus appeared at my door at exactly 6:55. "Mr. Zimmerman is waiting in the dining room, ma'am." I followed him through the house, memorizing the route. The dining room was formal, dominated by a table that could seat 20. Atlas sat at the head, reading something on his tablet, a glass of red wine beside him. He looked up as I entered, his eyes traveling over me in a way that felt clinical rather than appreciative. Punctual, good. He gestured to the chair at his right, not the opposite end of the long table, but still maintaining distance. "Sit." I sat. A woman in a chef's uniform appeared, placing plates before us. Seared fish, vegetables that had been arranged like art, sauces I couldn't name. The kind of meal that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. "The wedding is Monday," Atlas said, cutting into his fish with precision. "Small ceremony. Judge Morrison will officiate. Marco and Isabella will witness. Afterward, we'll host a reception for key family members. You'll need to be prepared to meet approximately 50 people, all of whom will be assessing whether you're suitable." "Suitable for what? I'm already signed, sealed, and delivered." His lips quirked slightly. "Suitable to be seen at my side without embarrassment. Some of these people have known me since childhood. Others are recent allies who need reassurance that this marriage serves its purpose." "And what do I need to do to pass their inspection?" "Be quiet. Be graceful. Let me speak for you." He took a sip of wine. "You're decorative, Zara. Beautiful, connected to the right family, and helpless enough that no one will suspect you of having your own agenda. Play that role, and everything will be fine." The casual cruelty of his words should have hurt. Instead, I felt something else. Anger, maybe. Or the beginning of defiance. "I'm not decorative," I said quietly. "I'm dying. There's a difference." "Is there?" He set down his glass, his attention fully on me now. "You're an object that serves my purpose. Whether that's because you're beautiful or because you're desperate doesn't change the fundamental transaction." I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. "You really don't see people as people, do you? We're all just pieces in whatever game you're playing." "I see people exactly as they are. Assets or liabilities. Useful or expendable." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those cold gray eyes. "The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." "And what am I? Asset or liability?" "You're both. An asset politically. A liability emotionally, if I were foolish enough to develop feelings for you." His expression revealed nothing. "Fortunately, I'm not foolish." I stood, my chair scraping against polished floors. "I'm tired. I'd like to go back to my quarters. We haven't finished dinner. I've lost my appetite." He was silent for a long moment, and I braced myself for anger or commands. Instead, he nodded once. "Marcus will escort you. Tomorrow you'll meet with the stylist at 9, the attorney at 11 to sign final documents, and Dr. Morrison at 2. Clear your schedule." "I don't have a schedule to clear." "Exactly." He turned his attention back to his tablet, dismissing me as thoroughly as if I'd ceased to exist. Marcus appeared from wherever he'd been waiting. I followed him back through the silent house, up the stairs, to my beautiful cage. Only when the door closed behind me did I let myself sink to the floor, my back against expensive wood, my hands trembling again. I'd sold myself to survive, but survival in a prison wasn't living. My phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. "How is it? Is he treating you well?" I almost laughed. How did I explain that he was treating me exactly as promised? With clinical courtesy and absolute emotional distance. I typed back, "It's fine. The house is beautiful. Her response came quickly. I'm so relieved. Marco says Atlas is a good man, Zara. Cold, but honorable. You'll be safe there. Safe. The word felt hollow. I was safe from medical debt, safe from dying alone in my apartment, safe from the indignity of poverty. But I wasn't safe from the slow suffocation of living with a man who looked at me like a balance sheet. Another text arrived, this time from an unknown number. Sleep well, wife. Monday changes everything. AZ. I stared at the message, at the casual possessiveness of wife, at the certainty in his words. He'd been tracking my phone, watching, making sure I understood that even here, in my quarters, I wasn't truly alone. I moved to the window, looking out at gardens I couldn't access, at walls I couldn't see but knew surrounded the property. In the reflection, I caught my own face. Pale, thin, marked by illness and choices that had seemed impossible until they became inevitable. Monday would make me Mrs. Atlas Zimmerman, and I had no idea if that would save me or destroy me. Monday arrived with merciless punctuality. I woke in my quarters to find a team already waiting. Hair, makeup, the stylist whose name I'd forgotten, all moving around me with practiced efficiency. They transformed me into something unrecognizable. My hair, usually pulled back simply, was styled in an elegant updo. The makeup made my illness-pale skin glow, and the dress they'd chosen was stunning. Ivory silk that managed to be both modest and breathtaking, with delicate beading that caught the light. I looked like a bride. I felt like a sacrifice. The ceremony was held in Atlas's study, the same room where he'd made his cold calculations about my usefulness. Judge Morrison was a severe woman in her 60s, who'd clearly performed this service before for people like Atlas. She spoke the words with bureaucratic efficiency, turning a sacred institution into a legal transaction. Isabella stood beside me, her hand squeezing mine too tightly. Marco stood with Atlas, his expression carefully neutral, and Atlas himself looked exactly as he always did, controlled, distant, his gray eyes revealing nothing as he spoke, vows that meant everything to the law and nothing to his heart. I, Atlas Zimmerman, take you, Zara Lanzimani, to be my lawfully wedded wife. The words were perfect, traditional, and completely empty. When it was my turn, I heard my voice speaking as if from a great distance. I, Zara Lanzimani, take you, Atlas Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded husband. The ring he slid onto my finger was platinum, set with diamonds that probably cost more than my previous life. It was beautiful and cold, just like everything else about this arrangement. You may kiss the bride, Judge Morrison said, already closing her book. Atlas's hand cupped my face with surprising gentleness, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, something that might have been regret or longing or perhaps just a trick of the light. Then his lips touched mine, brief and chaste and absolutely correct for an audience. But I felt it anyway. The spark, the heat, the suggestion that beneath his ice, something burned. He pulled back, his expression once again unreadable. Mrs. Zimmerman, the reception was held in the garden, under a tent that had appeared overnight like something from a fairy tale. 50 people, Atlas had said, 50 strangers who would judge whether I was worthy of standing beside Seattle's most dangerous man. They arrived in expensive cars, dressed in designer clothes, carrying themselves with the certainty that came from never having worried about money or medical bills or survival. I stood beside Atlas at the entrance, my hand resting on his arm, smiling until my face hurt. Smile, but don't speak unless directly addressed, he'd instructed before the first guest arrived. Let me handle all conversation. You're here to be seen, not heard. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him I wasn't a doll to be positioned and displayed. But I'd agreed to this role, and pride wouldn't pay for the experimental treatment Dr. Morrison had mentioned during our consultation. The guests were a mixture. Some were clearly legitimate business associates, tech executives, real estate developers, people whose power came from legal sources. But others carried themselves differently. Harder, more dangerous. These were the ones whose eyes lingered too long, who assessed me like they were calculating my worth and coming up short. "Atlas, you've been holding out on us," a man in his 60s said, his Italian accent thick. "She's beautiful. Where did you find her?" "Marco's family," Atlas replied smoothly, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on my waist. "Zara's sister is married to his nephew. The Lanzimani connection. Clever." The man's eyes traveled over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "And what does the lovely bride do?" "She manages my household," Atlas answered before I could speak, "and focuses on her health. Zara has been unwell." The admission surprised me. I'd expected him to hide my illness, to present me as perfect and healthy. Instead, he'd made it part of the narrative, explaining away my thinness and pallor with a truth that somehow felt like another layer of protection. The reception continued for hours. Food I couldn't eat because my stomach was in knots. Wine I didn't drink because it would interact with my medications. Conversation I wasn't part of, standing silent beside Atlas while he conducted business dressed up as celebration. I noticed things, though. The way certain people deferred to him absolutely, while others showed subtle resistance. The undercurrents of tension when a particular man arrived late. Younger, ambitious, his handshake with Atlas lasting a fraction too long. The whispered conversations that stopped when I came too close. This wasn't just a wedding reception. It was a display of power, a reminder of hierarchy, a warning to anyone who might question Atlas's position. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the tent, a woman approached me while Atlas was occupied across the room. She was perhaps 40, elegant in a burgundy dress, with eyes that had seen too much. "Mrs. Zimmerman," she said, her voice low. "I'm Sophia Caruso. My husband works with Atlas." I recognized the name. Caruso. One of the families Marco had mentioned. Old money and older loyalties. "It's nice to meet you," I replied carefully, remembering Atlas's instruction to be gracious but minimal. "I wanted to welcome you." Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And to offer some advice, if you'll accept it." I glanced toward Atlas, but he was still deep in conversation. "What kind of advice?" "Atlas Zimmerman is not a man who does anything without purpose. This marriage serves his interests, but that doesn't mean you're powerless." She leaned closer, her perfume expensive and cloying. "He has weaknesses, like all men. Find them. Use them. Make yourself indispensable in ways that go beyond the political arrangement." "I don't understand." "You will." She straightened as Atlas began moving toward us. "Remember, in this world, the wives who survive are the ones who become necessary." She drifted away before Atlas reached me, leaving me with more questions than answers. "What did Sophia want?" Atlas asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "To welcome me. To offer congratulations." Sophia Caruso doesn't do anything out of kindness. If she approaches you again, tell me immediately." His hand found the small of my back, steering me away from the crowd. "It's time for us to leave. We've been seen enough for one day." The guests were still celebrating when we slipped away, Marcus driving us back to the house in comfortable silence. Atlas sat beside me in the car, his attention on his phone, conducting business while I stared out at the darkening Seattle skyline. Back at the house, Mrs. Kovac had left a note about dinner being prepared if we wanted it. Atlas read it, crumpled it, and turned to me. "You did well today," he said, and it sounded like he was evaluating an employee's performance. "The families accepted you. That's what mattered." I'm glad I passed inspection. He caught the bitterness in my tone. You agreed to this arrangement, Zara. Don't pretend to be surprised by its nature. I agreed to be your wife, not your puppet. There's no difference. He moved toward the stairs, pausing with his hand on the banister. Not in my world. The sooner you accept that, the less you'll struggle against inevitabilities. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the stress of the day, maybe the dehumanizing parade of being displayed and discussed. Maybe it was just exhaustion from fighting, the cancer, the fear, the complete loss of control over my own existence. I want more freedom, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I want to be able to leave the house without an escort. I want to see my own doctors without your people monitoring everything. I want some part of my life that's still mine. Atlas turned slowly, his expression unreadable. No. You can't just... I can, and I will. He descended the stairs, crossing to where I stood, his presence overwhelming despite his controlled demeanor. You're my wife now, Zara. That means your safety is my responsibility. Do you know what happens to the wives of men like me when they're unprotected? When they're allowed to wander around the city without security? I'm not a child who needs constant supervision. You're a target. His voice went cold, hard. You became one the moment you took my name. There are people who would hurt you just to send me a message. People who would use you to get to me. People who see you as the easiest way to cause me pain. But you said you don't care about me, that this is just a contract. I don't have to care about you personally to protect what's mine. He was close now, too close, his eyes boring into mine. And you are mine, Zara. My wife, my responsibility, my problem to solve when threats arise. Your freedom is a luxury I won't provide because your safety matters more. Safety in a cage is still a cage. Something flickered across his face, an emotion I couldn't name. He turned away, moving to the windows that overlooked the dark gardens. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reflective. I had someone I cared about once, before I learned better. The admission hung in the air between us. She wanted freedom too, hated the security, the restrictions, the constant surveillance. She thought I was being controlling, possessive. I waited, sensing this was important, that he was offering something he rarely gave, a glimpse beneath the armor. One day, she convinced me to let her go to a charity function alone, just across town. Simple, safe, surrounded by people we knew. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. They took her from the parking garage, held her for 3 days before I found where they'd taken her. My breath caught. What happened? I got her back. His voice was absolutely empty. What was left of her? The horror of it crashed over me. Atlas, Don't. He cut me off. Don't apologize. Don't offer sympathy. It was 7 years ago. It's done. But it taught me something invaluable about the cost of caring for people in this world. About what happens when you let your guard down, when you prioritize someone's happiness over their safety. So, you built walls. I built a system. He turned back to face me. A system where nothing I care about is ever vulnerable again. Where threats are eliminated before they materialize. Where the people under my protection stay protected whether they like it or not. But you said you don't care about me. I don't. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. Because I was beginning to understand. But you're mine now. That's enough. You don't have to be loved to be protected, Zara. You just have to belong to someone who understands the value of what they possess. I should have argued. Should have fought against being called a possession again. But something in his story, in the barely concealed pain beneath his control, made me see him differently. Not as a monster, but as a man who'd learned that love was liability, that caring was dangerous, that the only way to survive in his world was to never let anything matter enough to destroy you. "I won't try to escape," I said quietly. "I won't fight the security. But I need something, Atlas. Some small piece of autonomy. Some reminder that I'm still a person, not just an asset." He studied me for a long moment. "What do you want?" "The garden. I want to be able to go to the garden whenever I want, without asking permission, without an escort. The garden is within the walls. Security monitors it constantly. But I could be alone there, just for a few hours a day. Please." He was silent, calculating, weighing risks against benefits. Finally, he nodded once. "The garden, during daylight hours only, and you carry a phone at all times that I can track." It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing this out of kindness." He moved toward the stairs again. "I'm doing it because a caged animal that's given a longer leash is easier to manage. Remember that." After he disappeared upstairs, I stood in the silent house, my wedding ring heavy on my finger, and tried to process everything he'd revealed. A woman he'd cared about, taken, tortured, returned broken. And Atlas, learning that love was the weapon his enemies would always use against him. No wonder he'd built these walls. No wonder he treated people like chess pieces. In his world, caring for someone was signing their death warrant. I made my way to my quarters, exhausted but unable to sleep. The ivory wedding dress hung in the closet like a ghost. My phone showed messages from Isabella, from old friends who'd heard about the wedding, all asking if I was happy. How did I answer that? I was protected, provided for, given access to medical care that would save my life. But I was also trapped, controlled, married to a man who'd made it clear that I would never be more than a useful possession. I changed into the silk nightgown that had been laid out, climbed into the enormous bed, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the house, Atlas was doing the same, both of us alone on our wedding night, exactly as he'd planned. But something had shifted today, in his story about the woman he'd lost, in the small concession of the garden, in the way he'd protected me at the reception without making it obvious. He didn't want to care about me, was probably terrified of caring about me. But he'd already claimed me as his, and with Atlas Zimmerman, possession seemed to be its own form of devotion. I just had to figure out if that would be enough to survive in his world. Or if, like the woman before me, I'd become another casualty of loving a man who'd learned to turn his heart to stone. The days after the wedding fell into a strange rhythm. I woke alone, had breakfast brought to my quarters by staff who moved like ghosts, and spent my mornings in the garden that Atlas had granted me like a king offering scraps to a peasant. Dr. Morrison came twice a week, running tests, adjusting treatments, speaking in the careful optimism that doctors used when they didn't want to promise miracles. The experimental protocol was working. My counts were improving. The cancer that had been consuming me was retreating, slowly, but measurably. I was being saved by money, and Atlas's connections to specialists most patients never even knew existed. Atlas himself remained distant. He left before I woke, conducting his dual empire of technology and crime from offices I wasn't invited to visit. Most evenings he returned after I'd retreated to my quarters. We existed in the same house like parallel lines, close but never touching. Until the night everything changed. I was in the garden, enjoying the late afternoon sun, when Marcus appeared at the gate. His usual calm demeanor was fractured, his jaw tight. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I need you to come inside immediately." The urgency in his voice sent fear spiking through me. "What's wrong?" "Please, ma'am, now." I followed him into the house where Atlas waited in his study, his expression carved from granite. Two other men I didn't recognize stood near the windows, both carrying the same dangerous energy that seemed standard for his associates. "Sit," Atlas said, and I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Worry, maybe, or carefully controlled rage. I sat. What happened? There's been a development. He pulled up something on his tablet, turned it to face me. It showed a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance, of me in the garden, just this morning, sitting on the bench by the roses. I don't understand. Someone has been watching the house, watching you. He swiped to the next image. This one showed me at a previous doctor's appointment, getting into the car. Another showed me at the window of my quarters. These were delivered to my office 2 hours ago with a message. What message? He was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, that you're my weakness, that if I don't step down from certain business interests, they'll prove it. The casual way he said it, as if discussing the weather rather than a death threat, made the horror worse somehow. Who sent them? Luca Torino, a Kappa regime who believes he should be sitting where I am. Atlas's voice went cold, dead. He's been gathering support from other families who question my legitimacy. My bastard status has always been ammunition for men like him. The word bastard was delivered without emotion, but I heard the old wound beneath it. The childhood of being othered within his own organization, of having to prove himself more ruthless, more controlled, more dangerous than anyone with legitimate blood claims. What are you going to do? What I always do. Eliminate the threat. He closed the tablet, his eyes finding mine. But first, I need to move you somewhere safer. Luca knows about this house, knows your routines. Until I've dealt with him, you're too exposed here. Move me where? I have a property in the San Juan Islands, completely isolated. Only my most trusted people know about it. He stood, moving to the bar to pour himself whiskey. The fact that he needed it told me more than his words. Marcus will drive you tonight. You'll stay there until this is resolved. For how long? However long it takes. He downed the whiskey in one swallow. Days, maybe weeks. The thought of being exiled to some island, even more isolated than I already was, made panic claw at my throat. Can I just stay here with increased security? No. The word was absolute. Luca is smart, dangerous. He won't make a frontal assault. He'll wait for an opening, a moment when you're vulnerable. And I won't risk that. So I'm being sent away. You're being protected. He set down the glass with controlled force. Do you understand what men like Luca do to prove points, Zara? What they did to... He stopped, his hands clenching. You're going to the island, tonight. That's not negotiable. I should have argued, should have fought against being moved around like a chess piece again. But something in his face, in the barely leashed tension in his shoulders, made me see the fear beneath his control. Not fear for himself, but for me, for what might happen if he failed to protect what he'd claimed as his. Okay, I said quietly. I'll go. Surprise flickered across his features, quickly masked. Good, pack what you need. Marcus leaves in an hour. I stood, moved toward the door, then turned back. Atlas? What? Be careful. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the walls came down. I saw exhaustion there, and determination, and something that might have been gratitude. I always am. But as I climbed the stairs to my quarters, I heard him speak to the men who'd remained in his study. Find Luca. I want his location within 6 hours. And make sure Zara's departure is completely invisible. If anyone sees her leave this house, they don't live to report it. The cold efficiency in his voice reminded me exactly who I'd married. The island house was beautiful in a stark, isolated way. modern architecture perched on cliffs overlooking dark water, surrounded by forest that pressed close like a living wall. Marcus had driven me to a private marina where a boat waited, captained by a silent man who'd transported us through midnight waters to this remote sanctuary. Mrs. Kovac had come too, apparently assigned to manage the household even in exile. She showed me to a bedroom with walls of glass facing the ocean, appointed with the same expensive impersonality as my quarters in Seattle. "Mr. Zimmerman will call when it's safe to return," she said, her tone suggesting this wasn't the first time she'd managed such relocations. "In the meantime, you have full access to the house and grounds. The perimeter is secured, but please don't venture beyond the markers." After she left, I explored my new cage. The house was smaller than the Seattle estate, but no less luxurious. There was a library, a gym, a gourmet kitchen I'd never use because staff prepared all meals. And everywhere, those windows showing nothing but water and trees and sky, beautiful and utterly empty of human life. I lasted 3 days before the isolation became suffocating. On the 4th morning, I woke to my phone ringing. Atlas's name on the screen. "How are you?" he asked without preamble. "Bored, isolated, going slightly insane." I moved to the windows, watching fog roll across the water. "How are things there?" "Progressing." His voice was carefully neutral. "Luca is proving more elusive than anticipated, but we're narrowing his location." "And when you find him?" Silence. Then, "He'll cease to be a problem." The casual way he discussed murder should have horrified me. Instead, I felt something else. Relief, maybe. Or the recognition that in Atlas's world, some threats could only be resolved with finality. "I miss the garden," I said, changing the subject. "The roses were just starting to bloom. When you return, they'll still be there." He paused, and I heard something in the background. Voices, movement. "I have to go. Marcus is there if you need anything." "Atlas, wait." "What?" "Thank you, for keeping me safe." Another pause, longer this time. "It's what I do, Zara. Protect what's mine." Then he hung up. I stared at the phone, at those words that should have felt possessive and controlling, but somehow didn't. In his language, mine meant protected, valued, worth defending. It wasn't love, but it was something. Dr. Morrison arrived on the 5th day, helicoptered in with equipment for my treatment. She set up in one of the spare bedrooms, efficient and professional as always. "Your counts continue to improve," she said, reviewing the latest blood work. "The protocol is working better than we hoped. If this continues, we might achieve full remission within 6 months." Full remission. The words I'd stopped letting myself hope for. "That's because of the treatment Atlas arranged," I said. "It's because you're responding well. Your body is fighting." She packed away her equipment. "But yes, without Mr. Zimmerman's resources, you wouldn't have access to this protocol. He's called me personally twice to check on your progress." That surprised me. "He has?" "He's very concerned about your welfare, Mrs. Zimmerman, more than most husbands I've treated." She smiled slightly, though I suspect he'd deny it if asked. After she left, I sat on the deck overlooking the water and tried to reconcile the Atlas, who'd told me he didn't have a heart, with the one who called my doctor to check on me, who'd exiled me to an island fortress to keep me safe, who'd looked at photographs of me and seen vulnerability instead of just a political asset. My phone rang again that evening. Atlas, his voice tighter than before. "Luca made contact. He wants to meet." Fear spiked through me. Is it a trap? Obviously, but it's also an opportunity. I heard him moving, the rustle of fabric. "I'm going to end this, Zara. Tonight." "Don't." The word escaped before I could stop it. "Don't go if it's a trap. Send someone else, please." I can't show weakness by sending subordinates to handle Luca. He challenged me directly. I have to respond directly." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "But I appreciate your concern. I don't want you to die." The admission hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us could acknowledge. "I won't," he said simply. "I have too much to protect now." He hung up before I could respond. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my beautiful prison, watching the sky lighten from black to gray, to the pale blue of dawn, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Every sound made me jump. Every hour that passed without word made the fear tighter. At 7 a.m., Marcus appeared at my door. "Mrs. Zimmerman, Mr. Zimmerman asked me to inform you that the situation has been resolved." Relief made my knees weak. "He's okay?" "He's fine. Luca Torino is no longer a threat. We'll return to Seattle this afternoon." I wanted to ask what "no longer a threat" meant. Wanted to know if Atlas had killed a man with his own hands or simply ordered it done. But some questions were safer left unasked. The boat ride back to the mainland was smooth, the drive to Seattle familiar. But when we pulled up to the estate, Atlas was waiting at the door. He looked tired, a bruise darkening his jaw, his knuckles wrapped in bandages. But alive, whole. I was out of the car before Marcus had fully stopped, moving toward Atlas without thinking. He caught me as I reached him, his arms coming around me in surprise. I started, then couldn't finish. "I told you I'd be fine." His voice rumbled against my ear. "I keep my promises, Zara." We stood like that for a long moment, longer than was appropriate for our arrangement. When he finally pulled back, something had shifted in his eyes. Something that looked almost like fear. "Come inside," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "We need to talk." In his study, he poured whiskey for both of us, handed me a glass with steady hands that betrayed nothing of whatever he was feeling. "Luca is dead," he said bluntly. "So are 3 of his associates, who were part of the plot. The families have been informed. There will be no retaliation." "How can you be sure?" "Because I made it clear what happens to people who threaten what's mine." He took a long drink. "But Luca said something before he died. Something that's been troubling me." I waited, my heart hammering. "He said you were my weakness. That caring about you made me vulnerable." Atlas set down his glass, his eyes finding mine, and he was right. The admission hung in the air between us. "I thought I could keep you at a distance," he continued. "Thought I could protect you without it mattering. But somewhere in these past weeks, you stopped being just an arrangement, and that terrifies me more than any threat Luca could have made." "Atlas, I can't love you, Zara." The words were almost gentle. "I won't, but I'm beginning to care whether you live or die for reasons that have nothing to do with political strategy, and that's dangerous for both of us." I moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his admission. "Maybe it doesn't have to be." "It does." But he didn't step away when I reached him. "In my world, caring for someone paints a target on their back. You've already seen that. Then we make me less of a target. Teach me to protect myself. Let me understand your world instead of keeping me ignorant." My hand found his, my fingers tracing the bandages. "I'm already in this, Atlas. Pretending I'm not doesn't make me safer." He looked at our joined hands, his jaw tight. Then slowly he pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. "This wasn't supposed to happen. I know. You were supposed to be safe, distant, just a name and a face. I know. But you're not." His hand cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone. "And I don't know how to protect you from myself." I rose on my toes, my lips finding his in a kiss that was nothing like our wedding ceremony. This was real, desperate, two people acknowledging something they'd been fighting. He responded immediately, his control shattering as he pulled me against him, the kiss deepening into something that promised much more. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were dark with desire and fear in equal measure. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. I still can't promise you love. I know that too." I held his gaze. "But maybe you can promise me honesty, partnership, a chance to be more than just something you protect." He was silent for a long moment, his hands still on my waist. Finally, he nodded. "I can try." It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was more than I'd had before, more than either of us had expected. And as he kissed me again, carrying me toward the stairs with clear intent, I realized that with Atlas Zimmerman, this might be as close to love as either of us would ever get. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. That night changed everything and nothing. Atlas made love to me with an intensity that spoke of desperation and need, as if he was trying to claim every part of me, while simultaneously keeping some essential piece of himself locked away. Afterward, we lay tangled in his bed, our bed now, and I traced the scars on his chest that he'd never explained. "Where did you get this one?" I asked, my finger following a long mark along his ribs. "Chicago, 7 years ago. A disagreement about territory." His voice was matter of fact, discussing violence like it was business, which I supposed it was. "And this?" A puckered circle near his shoulder. "Bullet. Miami. 4 years ago." I kissed the scar, feeling him tense beneath my touch. "You've lived a dangerous life." "I still do." His hand found my hair, fingers threading through the strands. "That doesn't change just because I've let you closer, Zara. If anything, it makes everything more complicated." "Then teach me." I propped myself up to look at him. "Stop keeping me ignorant about your world. Let me understand what I'm part of." He was silent for a long moment, his gray eyes searching mine. Finally, he nodded. "Tomorrow, I'll show you what you've married into." The next morning, I woke to find Atlas already dressed, watching me from the chair beside the bed. There was something different in his expression. A decision made, a line crossed. "Get dressed," he said. "Something professional. You're coming to work with me today." An hour later, I sat beside him in the car as Marcus drove us into downtown Seattle. But we didn't go to the gleaming Zimmerman Tower. Instead, we pulled into an unremarkable office building in an industrial area I'd never visited. "This is the real center of operations," Atlas explained as we took an elevator to the basement level. "The tower is for legitimate business. Here is where I actually run things." The basement opened into a space that looked like a command center. Monitors lined one wall, showing security feeds from locations across the city. Men and women worked at computers. Others spoke in low voices on phones. It was professional, efficient, and completely illegal. "Welcome to how I actually maintain control," Atlas said, his hand at the small of my back as he guided me through. "Every shipment, every transaction, every movement of goods through Seattle, I know about it. Most of it I profit from." He showed me everything. The money laundering operations hidden in legitimate businesses. The port access that allowed certain cargo to arrive without official inspection. The network of politicians and police who took his money and provided protection in return. The careful balance between the technology empire that made him billions legally and the criminal enterprise that gave him real power. "You're not shocked," he observed as we sat in his private office, watching the operation through one-way glass. "I knew what you were when I married you. Seeing the details doesn't change that." I turned to face him. "But I understand now why you kept me separate. This world destroys people who aren't strong enough to survive it." "Yes." His hand found mine. which is why I need you to understand the rules, to know what's safe and what will get you killed. He spent the next hour explaining the hierarchy of his organization, the families he worked with, the ones he merely tolerated, the enemies who wanted him dead. He showed me photographs, explained relationships, made me memorize names and faces. "This woman," he said, pulling up an image of someone I recognized from the wedding reception. "Sofia Caruso. What did she say to you?" I recalled her cryptic warning about making myself indispensable. "She offered advice about surviving in your world." "Sofia's husband is loyal to me, but she has her own ambitions. She sees you as either an ally or a threat." His eyes met mine. "Which do you think you are?" "That depends on what she wants." A slight smile. "Good answer. Never commit without understanding the full situation." He closed the file. "Sofia is maneuvering to have her son elevated within the organization. She thinks getting close to you gives her leverage with me." "Does it?" "It would have, a month ago." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Now it's more complicated. Now I'd be tempted to give her what she wants just to keep you safe from her schemes." The admission of that vulnerability, that my influence over him was already affecting his decisions, sent a thrill through me that I knew I should suppress. We returned to the estate for lunch. Atlas had meetings scheduled for the afternoon, but he asked me to sit in on them. "Just observe," he instructed. "Say nothing unless I specifically ask for your input, but pay attention. Learn how this works." The meetings were with various business associates, some legitimate, some clearly not. I watched Atlas navigate between charm and threat with fluid ease, offering opportunities with one breath and consequences with the next. He was magnificent, terrifying, completely in control. Until a particular man arrived for the final meeting of the day, Vincent Caruso, Sofia's son. He was perhaps 30, handsome in a calculated way, and he looked at me with interest that made Atlas's entire demeanor shift. "Vincent," Atlas said, his voice cold. "Thank you for coming." "Atlas, and this must be your lovely bride." Vincent's smile was practiced, professional. "The photos from the wedding didn't do you justice, Mrs. Zimmerman." I felt Atlas tense beside me, his hand finding my knee under the table in a possessive grip. "My wife is observing today," Atlas said, "to better understand how I conduct business." "Excellent idea. A woman should understand her husband's work." Vincent sat, his attention still partially on me. "Especially when that husband controls half the city." The meeting was ostensibly about expansion opportunities in the shipping sector, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension, the way Vincent pushed boundaries just slightly, testing how far he could go. "Your mother speaks highly of you," Atlas said at one point. "She believes you're ready for more responsibility." "I am." Vincent leaned forward. "I've proven my loyalty repeatedly. I've earned advancement. Loyalty isn't about what you've done. It's about what you'll do." Atlas's voice went deadly soft. "And I'm not convinced you understand the difference." Vincent's jaw tightened. His eyes flickered to me again, and I saw calculation there. "I understand perfectly. I understand that everything you have can be taken. Even the things you treasure most." The threat was barely veiled. Atlas stood slowly, his controlled movement more dangerous than any overt aggression. "This meeting is over. Marcus will show you out." After Vincent left, Atlas remained standing, his hands clenched into fists. "That," he said quietly, "is what I was trying to protect you from. Men like Vincent who see you as leverage, who look at you and see my weakness." "He was testing you," I said, standing to face him, seeing if mentioning me would provoke a reaction. It did. His eyes were dark with barely suppressed rage. I wanted to kill him for looking at you that way, for even thinking about using you against me. I moved closer, my hands finding his face, forcing him to look at me. Then don't give him the satisfaction. Don't let him see that it worked. It's too late for that. His hands grip my waist. He knows now. They all know. That you matter to me in ways that have nothing to do with political strategy. Then we use it. He pulled back slightly, studying my face. What? We use their perception. Let them think I'm your weakness while I actually become your strength. The idea was forming as I spoke. Sophia wants influence for her son. Other families probably want the same. Let them come to me. Let me be the soft approach while you remain hard. You want to become a power broker. I want to be useful to you in ways beyond just existing. I held his gaze. You said I needed to understand your world. I'm starting to. And I see opportunities that you can't access because everyone's too afraid of you. He was silent, considering. Then slowly, he smiled. Not his cold smile, but something genuine. You continue to surprise me. Is that good or bad? Dangerous. His lips found mine. But I think I like it. That evening, Sophia Caruso called. I answered, ignoring Atlas's raised eyebrow. Mrs. Zimmerman, I was hoping we could have lunch. Just us, woman to woman. I'd like that, I said, watching Atlas's expression. When? We arranged to meet at an upscale restaurant downtown 2 days later. After I hung up, Atlas crossed his arms. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm playing your game. I moved into his space. You taught me the rules today. Now let me show you I learned them. The lunch with Sophia was exactly what I expected. A careful dance of veiled offers and subtle threats. She wanted Vincent elevated to a position of real authority. She believed I had influence over Atlas that I could use on her behalf. Atlas values my opinion on some matters, I said carefully, but business decisions are his domain. Even business decisions affected by personal considerations? Sophia's smile was sharp. Vincent is talented, loyal, and ambitious. He deserves advancement, and having allies in powerful positions benefits everyone. What are you really asking me, Sophia? She leaned forward, her voice dropping. I'm asking you to remind your husband that loyalty should be rewarded, that keeping talented men suppressed breeds resentment, that Vincent could be his greatest asset if given the chance, or his greatest threat if ambition outweighs loyalty. Her eyes narrowed. You've learned quickly. I have a good teacher. I set down my glass. I'll speak to Atlas about Vincent, but I can't promise anything beyond that. His decisions are his own. That's all I ask. She smiled, satisfied. You're smarter than I thought, Mrs. Zimmerman. That's good. You'll need to be, married to a man like Atlas. When I returned home and told Atlas about the conversation, he listened without interruption. Then he pulled me into his study, closing the door. Vincent is dangerous, he said. Ambitious, skilled, and resentful that his bloodline doesn't automatically elevate him. Giving him more power could backfire spectacularly. Or it could secure Sophia's loyalty, make her indebted to you instead of scheming against you. You're suggesting I promote someone who threatened you yesterday. I'm suggesting you turn a potential enemy into a controlled asset. I moved closer. Give Vincent a position with authority, but keep him on a short leash. Make Sophia grateful. And if he steps out of line, you have cause to eliminate him without political backlash. Atlas studied me for a long moment. When did you become this calculating? When I married you. When I decided to survive in your world instead of just existing in it. I held his gaze. You said I needed to be strong enough for this life. I'm showing you I can be. He pulled me against him, his kiss hard and possessive. You're magnificent, and terrifying, and mine. Yours, I agreed. But not weak, not powerless, not just something you protect. No. His eyes held something I'd never seen before. Pride, maybe. Or the beginning of something deeper. You're becoming something much more dangerous. You're becoming my equal. That night, as we lay in bed, Atlas's phone rang. He answered with a curt greeting, listened, then his entire body went rigid. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. Secure the perimeter. I'm on my way. He was out of bed immediately, dressing with military efficiency. What's wrong? I asked, fear spiking through me. Someone hit one of my warehouses, took out 3 of my men. His face was carved from stone. This is retaliation for Luca. Someone else is making a move. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Atlas. No. He turned, his eyes fierce. This is exactly the kind of situation I kept you from. You stay here, locked in, with full security. I'll handle this. Who do you think it is? He was silent for a moment. Then, Vincent Caruso. The name hung between us, weighted with implications. You think he's using his mother's approach to you as cover, while he moves against you directly. I think he's ambitious enough to try, and stupid enough to believe he can succeed. Atlas checked his weapon with practiced ease. If I'm right, this ends tonight. If I'm wrong, I've just started a war with the Caruso family. Either way, you can't go alone. I won't be alone. I'll have 20 men. He crossed to me, his hand cupping my face. But I need you safe, Zara. I need to know that while I'm dealing with this, you're here, protected, untouchable. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist on being part of this. But I saw the fear beneath his control, the terror that history would repeat itself, that someone he cared about would be taken while he was distracted. Be careful, I whispered. Always. He kissed me once, hard and desperate. If anything happens to me, Marcus has instructions. You'll be protected, provided for, kept safe. Nothing's going to happen to you. We don't know that. In my world, certainty is a luxury. His thumb traced my lower lip. But I promise you this. I'll fight like hell to come back. Because for the first time in 7 years, I have something worth fighting for. Then he was gone, and I was alone in our bed, staring at the ceiling, praying to a God I barely believed in, that the man I'd married, the dangerous, complicated, ruthless man who'd somehow become essential to me, would survive the night. Because somewhere between the contract and now, between protection and partnership, I'd broken the cardinal rule. I'd fallen in love with Atlas Zimmerman, and I had no idea if that would save us both or destroy everything. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. I sat in the study where I could see the security monitors, watching feeds from around the property. Marcus had positioned additional men at every entrance. Mrs. Kovach had locked down the house, and I waited, my phone clutched in my hand, for news that Atlas was alive. At 3 a.m., my phone finally rang. It's done. Atlas's voice was rough, exhausted. Vincent is dead, so are the men who helped him. Relief crashed through me so powerfully I had to sit down. Are you hurt? Nothing serious. I'm coming home. When he arrived an hour later, he looked like he'd walked through hell. Blood spattered his shirt. Not his own, he assured me quickly. His knuckles were raw, his face marked with exhaustion and something darker. The aftermath of violence. I met him in the foyer, not caring that Mrs. Kovach and Marcus were watching. I went straight to him, my hands framing his face, checking for injuries. I'm fine, he said, but his voice cracked slightly on the words. You're not. I could see it in his eyes. the toll that killing took, even on a man as hardened as Atlas. Come on. I led him upstairs, into the bathroom, and ran the shower. He undressed mechanically while I gathered clean clothes. When he stepped under the water, I joined him, washing the blood from his skin with gentle hands. Vincent confessed before he died, Atlas said, his voice hollow. He'd been planning this for months, using his mother's approach to you as distraction while he built alliances against me. He thought killing my men would make me look weak, vulnerable, that the families would turn on me. But they didn't. No, because I showed them what happens to people who challenge me. His eyes met mine. I executed him myself, Zara, in front of everyone who needed to see it. I put a bullet in his head and reminded them all why they fear me. The brutality of it should have horrified me. Instead, I understood. In his world, mercy was weakness. Hesitation was death. He'd done what needed to be done to protect everything he'd built. And Sophia? Under house arrest until I decide whether she knew about Vincent's plans. He leaned his forehead against mine, water cascading over us both. This is what my life is, Zara. Violence and decisions that haunt you. Blood that never quite washes off. Are you sure this is what you want? I pulled back to look at him. I want you. All of you. The parts that build empires and the parts that destroy threats. I'm not afraid of your darkness, Atlas. Not anymore. Something broke in his expression. He kissed me desperately, his hands tangling in my wet hair, and I tasted the fear and relief and need on his lips. We made love right there, against the shower wall, with an urgency that spoke of survival and claiming and the desperate human need to feel alive after dancing with death. Afterward, wrapped in soft robes, we sat on the bed while I bandaged his knuckles with steady hands. I love you, I said quietly, not looking at him. I know that wasn't part of the arrangement. I know you don't want to hear it. But I need to say it anyway, because tonight made me realize I could lose you. And I can't keep pretending this is just a contract anymore. He was silent for so long I thought he might not respond at all. Then his hand caught my chin, tilting my face up to meet his eyes. I told myself I wouldn't let this happen. That I'd keep you at a distance, keep you safe by never letting you matter. His thumb traced my lower lip. But somewhere between protecting you and showing you my world, you stopped being an arrangement. You became essential. Atlas, I can't promise you normal, Zara. I can't promise you safety or peace or anything resembling a conventional marriage. What I can promise is that I'll burn the city to ashes before I let anyone hurt you, that you'll never want for anything, that every breath I take is dedicated to keeping you alive and whole. He paused, his jaw tight. And that I love you. God help us both. But I love you. The words I'd never expected to hear from him crashed over me like a wave. You said you didn't have a heart to give. I lied. His smile was bitter. Or maybe I found one. You made me find one, standing there in my office months ago, desperate and brave and refusing to let me reduce you to just an asset. You made me want to be more than the monster everyone thinks I am. I kissed him then, pouring everything I felt into it. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pulled something from the nightstand drawer. A velvet box. I was going to wait, he said, opening it to reveal a necklace, a single diamond on a delicate platinum chain. But after tonight, after almost losing everything, waiting seems foolish. He fastened it around my neck, the diamond settling just above my heart. This was my grandmother's, the only woman my grandfather ever loved. He gave it to her the night he told her the truth about what he was, about the life she was entering. She wore it every day until she died. I touched the diamond, feeling its weight. its significance. You're giving me your family history. I'm giving you my heart. What's left of it anyway? His hands framed my face. You're not just my wife anymore, Zara. You're my partner, my equal, the person I trust with everything, including the parts of me I thought were dead. Over the following weeks, our dynamic shifted completely. Atlas included me in business decisions, valued my perspective, introduced me to his world not as decoration, but as his partner. I attended meetings, learned the intricacies of his operations, and proved myself capable of navigating the dangerous politics of his organization. Sophia Caruso was eventually released after Atlas determined she'd been ignorant of Vincent's plans. She approached me at a family gathering a month later, her pride visibly wounded, but her eyes sharp with understanding. You're stronger than I thought, she said quietly, and smarter. Vincent underestimated you. That's why he's dead and you're standing here. Vincent underestimated Atlas, I corrected. I had nothing to do with his decision. Didn't you? Her smile was knowing. Atlas Zimmerman was a machine before you, efficient, deadly, but predictable. Now he's something more dangerous. He's a man with something to lose. That makes him more ruthless, not less. Vincent didn't understand that. She was right. Atlas had become more dangerous since acknowledging what I meant to him. Not weaker, as his enemies had hoped, but more focused. He eliminated threats with surgical precision, no longer content to simply maintain control, but actively expanding his empire to ensure I'd always be protected. But he was also gentler with me. The ice that had defined our early interactions had melted into something warmer, more real. He still maintained his fearsome reputation in the outside world, but in our private moments, he was simply Atlas, complex, damaged, but trying to be better for me. My health continued to improve. Dr. Morrison was cautiously optimistic, using words like remission and positive prognosis, instead of the dire predictions from months ago. The experimental treatment Atlas had arranged was working miracles, buying me time that I'd thought was gone forever. You're going to live, Atlas said one evening, pulling me into his arms as we stood on the terrace overlooking the gardens. Dr. Morrison told me today, full remission within 3 months if the current trajectory continues. I turned in his embrace, seeing the relief naked on his face. You were worried, terrified. His admission was quiet. I've lost everyone I've ever cared about, Zara. My mother when I was 12. My grandfather who raised me. Elena, 7 years ago. I couldn't survive losing you too. You won't. I pressed my hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me. His hands tightened on my waist. Promise me you'll fight. That you'll take every treatment, follow every protocol, do whatever it takes to stay alive. I promise. I meant it. Not just for him, but for myself. For the future we were building together. 3 months later, Dr. Morrison confirmed what we'd been hoping for. Full remission. The cancer that had been consuming me was gone, beaten back by money and medicine and sheer stubborn will to survive. Atlas took me to the San Juan Island house to celebrate. Just the two of us and minimal security. We spent a week there, away from the business and the violence and the constant calculations. Just being together. I want to expand the foundation, I said one evening as we watched the sunset, paint the water in shades of gold and orange. Your legitimate charities? I want to focus on cancer research, on making the treatments that saved me available to people who can't afford them. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'll fund whatever you need. You'll run it however you see fit. You're giving me that much authority? You're my wife, my partner, my equal. He pulled me closer. Besides, it's good for my image. The ruthless mob boss with a heart of gold, funding cancer research. I laughed, the sound startling in the quiet evening. You're using my near-death experience for PR? I'm using everything at my disposal to protect what's mine. But he was smiling, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. And you're the best PR I've ever had. Since our marriage, 3 families have approached me wanting alliances. They see you as proof I'm building something lasting, not just maintaining power. So I'm valuable after all. You were always valuable. His lips found my temple. I was just too stupid and scared to admit it. We returned to Seattle to find the business running smoothly in our absence. Atlas had restructured after Vincent's death, promoting people he trusted and eliminating those whose loyalty was questionable. The organization was stronger, more stable, more unified under his absolute control. But he was different too, less isolated. He invited me into meetings, asked my opinion on decisions, treated me as the partner I'd become. The families adjusted, some more easily than others, but all eventually accepting that Atlas Zimmerman's wife wasn't just decorative, she was integral to his operations. I launched the foundation 6 months after my remission was confirmed. Atlas attended the opening gala, standing beside me as I announced funding for research programs and patient assistance initiatives. Watching him, I saw the man he might have been in a different life. Still powerful, still commanding, but using those qualities to build, rather than just destroy. You're proud of me, I said later, in the car going home. Always. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something that will save lives. You're remarkable, Zara. I learned from you. You took your bastard status, the thing people used to diminish you, and became so powerful they can't question you anymore. We're a pair, aren't we? His smile was wry. 2 broken people who somehow fit together. Not broken anymore, I corrected. Healing. That night, as we lay in bed, Atlas's hand resting on my stomach in a gesture that had become habit, he spoke quietly into the darkness. I want children, with you. When you're ready, when the doctors say it's safe. I want to build something beyond the business, beyond the power. I want a family. The admission stunned me. You said you'd never risk caring that much again. I said a lot of things before you. His hand tightened slightly. But you changed everything, Zara. You made me want a future instead of just survival. You made me believe I could be more than what I was raised to be. I turned to face him, seeing vulnerability in his expression. I want that too. A family. A real one. Built on choice instead of obligation. It won't be easy. Our children will inherit complicated legacies. They'll need to be strong. They will be, because they'll have you teaching them how to navigate your world, and me teaching them how to stay human in it. I kissed him softly. We'll give them what we didn't have. Parents who love each other, who choose each other every day. I do choose you. His voice was fierce. Every day, every moment. In every decision I make, you're the constant, the one thing I'm certain of in an uncertain world. A year after our wedding, we stood in the same garden where I had once sought small freedoms, surrounded by roses in full bloom. But this time, there were no restrictions, no guards monitoring my movements. Just Atlas and me, and the life we'd built from an arrangement that should have been cold and transactional but had become something infinitely more. Do you regret it? I asked, leaning against his chest. Marrying me for strategy and ending up with something more complicated. Every day, he said, and I felt him smile against my hair. I regret that I wasted months trying to keep you at a distance. I regret not telling you I loved you sooner. I regret every moment I made you feel like a possession instead of a partner. But I don't regret you. I don't regret us. I don't regret building this empire and then discovering it meant nothing without someone to share it with. He turned me in his arms, his eyes holding mine. You were supposed to be a political move, Zara. A name that solidified my power. Instead, you became the reason I want that power in the first place. To protect you. To give you everything. To build a legacy worth leaving behind. I reached up, my fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. I love you, Atlas Zimmerman. My dangerous, complicated, ruthless husband who turned out to have a heart after all. I love you, Zara Zimmerman. My brave, brilliant wife who taught me that strength isn't about walls. It's about choosing what's worth fighting for. He kissed me there, in the garden where I'd once sought small freedoms, and I tasted our future on his lips. A future built not on fear or contracts or strategic necessity, but on choice. On the daily decision to stand together, to fight together, to love despite the dangers and complications and impossible odds. The cancer was gone. The threats were managed. The empire was secure. And Atlas Zimmerman, the man who'd learned to turn his heart to stone, had found something worth bleeding for, worth dying for, worth living for. Me. And every day, we chose each other. Not because we had to, but because in a world built on power and fear, we'd found something more valuable. We'd found love that was strong enough to survive anything, even us.